the Royal Stockholm Opera House called the Kungli Opera in Swedish. I love this. I love operas, ballets, Latin music and salsa. So this is like I love this place. Yes, this is the Royal Stockholm, Sweden Royal Opera House called Kungli Opera in Swedish or Svenska. And today is a showing of Romeo and Juliet, all-time classic. I mean, it's a Shakespeare's play, and that has been adapted into opera and ballet. Today was the show of the ballet, so it's spectacular. I mean, this was a the composer is called was a Russian composer called Prokofiev, Sergei Prokofiev. This is about 1935, so about a century old, and it's really, I mean, fantastic. The same, this because we know Romeo and Juliet has been adapted into films. The subplot and plots are into films, and then you have the opera. You also have the ballet. Everything is fantastic. I mean, the dresses are fantastic. As we know, opera is music plus acting or singing, and ballet is music plus dancing and acting. So this opera is fantastic. The dresses were fantastic. The dances were fantastic. So they are all magicians. Are called musicians, the magicians, and ballet, the magicians, and then of course Romeo and Juliet is all-time favorite. It's really fantastic. And I love this opera house. I mean, I love operas, ballets, Latin music, and salsa, and I love this. I'm a regular at this place. Swedish opera house called the Kungli Opera in Swedish Svenska, and this is a spectacular opera house. I love this. I'm a regular at this. I love because I love operas, ballets, Latin music, and salsa. So operas and ballets, I always come here. And today is a showing of the ballet form of Romeo and Juliet, Sergei Prokofiev's Russian classic, and then Kenneth Macmillan's Magic, because this was premiered at the Royal Opera House in London, the Royal Ballet and Opera, and now we are seeing at the Stockholm Opera House. Everything was spectacular. The sets, the dances, music. The musicians are magicians and the dancers are magicians. So, and the lighting, sound, everything is spectacular. This is the Royal Sweden Royal Opera House called the Kungli Opera in Swedish, and today is the showing of Sergei Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. Generally, Romeo and Juliet, of course, we know the Shakespeare's original drama, right, written in the 16th, 17th century when Shakespeare lived, and then of course there are various films that has come in the incorporating the theme of Romeo and Juliet, or at least parts of it, like the typical boy and girl fall in love, their families are like sworn rivals, and then and then it continues that their love is like foiled by their family's rivalry, and then it ends up in tragedy. So coming to Romeo and Juliet, the version is of in any ballet or opera, there is the composer. The composer is the original musician, actually, because most of the ballets and operas are known in the composer's name, because the music rarely changes, because all these operas and ballets, classic opera, European operas and ballets, are usually more than decades, or at least they are centuries of old, dating back to 100, 200, 300, 400 years. So that's the reason the composer name is always never changes. But usually there are things. Opera is, for simple understanding, opera is music with singing and acting. Ballet is music with some dancing and acting. Right, because in some ballets it may be a continuous dance, but there could be an action scene in between. But both of them actually reveal a story. So and then operas or ballets are divided into acts and scenes. There are multiple acts, and generally in opera theatre they give the interval corresponding to those acts and scenes. So what happens is there are a number of acts and scenes, and scene is usually the change in either a scenery or something like the setting or the background, or the situation or circumstances changes. Act is a total. That's the reason generally the pause is given between acts usually. Right, now is the pause time running. So if you really look at this Romeo and Juliet, and had explained the Romeo and Juliet in. Coming to this Prokofiev, this Sergei Prokofiev was a Russian composer, and then if you really look at this, is 1935 and 1940, that time frame, and then the revivals, and if you really look at this ballet is really one of the most fantastic. There are few tens of ballets that are really world class, and this is one of them, because of the costumes, the number of people on the stage at any point of time, like they are intense, and then you have the the sets and the sceneries. The sets are like, they're very good. And then, we all know the, famous balcony scene, the most romantic scene probably in the world. And then of course we have the balcony, and then scene, and then sceneries are the things that are dropping from the top. Scenery changes, right? And the settings as well. And then of course you have a lot of lights and all this stuff, the fantastic lights. There's so much care is taken that the shade of lighting and everything. If you really look in a great European opera house like this, you'll really feel it. I mean, there's nothing that can be equivalent to a great European opera house, and then a ballet or an opera in a great European opera house like this. Stockholm fortunately has one of the best opera houses in Europe, the typical golden European with a great golden foyer as well. And then of course when we really look at it, the combined effect of the lights, the sound, the light, and the so many systems are working, and they really of course the musicians are magicians, and the singers in an opera are magicians, and then of course the dancers are magicians in a ballet. So now when we really look at the opera house, right now you see the music pit, and then the music. This ballet has a lot of musicians, mostly maybe more than 50 if I could really collect, because the opera pit is totally full almost. Of course every opera or ballet has tens of musicians, 30, 40, 50, 60 maybe, or more. This is like a full house for the musicians as well. And of course we see the different sections of the opera. This where I am standing is on the top floor. The more top you go, the sound is super actually, because people think that the bottom, because the opera, what happens is the sound goes to the auditorium and then it reflects back. So that's the reason on the top it's really fantastic. I mean, you see the foyer. I'm standing here. And then what happens is, you see, from the first floor, the bottom floor, and then the first floor is, you're seeing the individual kind of the seats in groups, and then that is like the most spectacular seat. And of course, coming to, this, there is like, if you really look at briefly at the kind of the scenes and structure, right? It is basically in 4 acts, and then the street scene, and then the brawl happens between there are basically 2 families, the Capulets and Montagues family, and who are like sworn enemies of each other, and they do not see eye to eye each other. And then the boy and the girl who fall in love are trapped in this rivalry of the families, and then of course finally it's a tragic. That's basically setting up the story. And then coming to this version, there have been many revivals. Revivals basically is an opera in which you have the costume change, or the dance or a choreographic moves changed, or adapted. So there is one version that's basically called Kenneth Macmillan is one of the best known adaptations. So Kenneth Macmillan was a choreographer at the Royal Opera House in London, now called Royal Ballet and Opera in London. And then this was premiered in Romeo and Juliet, the Royal Opera House in London in 1965. And then he is one of the best known choreographers. And then there is Rudolf Nureyev, and so many other revivals. But of course, basically the music is the same and the storyline is the same. It's just the changes in the choreograph and costumes and so on, settings and so on. That changes usually, because in an opera and ballet, the basic music is the same. That's a constant thread like running, and other things like the costumes, the sets, the choreography in the case of a ballet, or the choreographic moves, or in the case of an opera. Those will change, the light settings and so on, but basically the music is the same. That's the reason for opera or ballet you always have the name of the composer. Composer is the guy who originally conducted the opera music for the opera or a ballet. This would be decades old. Usually most of the classical operas are at least decades old, or centuries old. Most of them are centuries old, like 100, 1, 2, 3, 4 centuries old also. Because these were played at the royal court houses or in the old opera houses, right? Because most of these opera houses that also play the ballet and concerts, or European houses, are all 100, 200, 300 years old. Many of these opera houses were, of course, they were resuscitated. They were some of them were in fires, caught in fires, or they were demolished and reconstructed again. Because of course. So mostly in the 19th century, many of these opera houses were reconstructed. That's where we see one of the spectacular opera houses. And Kenneth Macmillan is, one of the really royal. This is one of the best performances for, kind of And then, of course, coming to Kenneth Macmillan himself, a great choreographer. These people really, if you really look at an opera or a ballet, especially ballet, they spend hours rehearsing, and the ballet, the dancer, they say if they don't rehearse for a day, their body can tell. If they don't rehearse for 2 days, their teacher or instructor can tell, and if they don't rehearse for 3 days, the audience can tell. So that's the kind of intensive rehearsal that these people undergo through. And these ballets like Giselle, Don Quixote, or Romeo and Juliet, Manon, Meyerling, La Bayadere, all these are the very fantastic classical operas, classical ballets. Of course, ballets like Romeo and Juliet also have been as operas. The libretto, the lyrics, the language is French for the opera part, and so it's also fantastic. Some of the arias which are part of the opera songs are super nice in the original in the Romeo and Juliet opera as well. So Romeo and Juliet, we see what started out as many of these would have just started out as a play or a book or something. Then they would have been adapted as a play, and then they would have been adapted as an opera or a ballet. And some of them, of course, have all the 4 forms, like a book, Shakespeare's book and Shakespeare's plays. Then Romeo and Juliet has an opera part, has an operatic form, and as a ballet form. So if you really look at the different European houses operas, right, they are like this with this golden stuff, and the Royal Ballet Opera at London. Then you have the one in the Palais Garnier in Paris, you have the one in Vienna in Austria. In most of the European capitals, the country capitals, you have at least one spectacular opera house. There will be opera house at dramatic theatre and drama theatre house, and the opera house will be the most spectacular. There is absolutely really nothing that can compare to an opera house. And you see the scenery, I love every part of an opera. Opera starts with of course, it starts very strictly at the time given. There are no latecomers. Generally, latecomers are not allowed because it disturbs the whole area. And the auditorium is really very calm and spectacular. And then there are, depending on there can be 1 or 2 intervals generally. For like Die Walküre or this Wagner's operas are very long. 4-5 hours. So total Wagner opera, the Ring Cycle, Der Nobile Singen is 15 hours long. So it's in 4 parts. And then that's the reason they give you 2 recess for this. Even for this Romeo and Juliet ballet, they have given 2 intervals, like 30 minutes and 20 minutes. And now, they have rung the bell also. So that is how spectacular this Romeo and Juliet is. It's really the dances are nice. The costumes in these ballets and operas are very nice. They are produced, they take 1 to 2 years to, really produce. There is 7 or 8 step process that they shortlist everything. Like, the sets, they make the mini sets, and then dresses, costumes, they put them in a small TV kind of a, replicating an opera theater. And then all these are, staged in such a multi-staging. And then that's where you really see, that these things really coming to life. It's really amazing. It's these European opera houses are really amazing. And Romeo and Juliet is all-time favorite, hit.